there was a crowd at Pennsylvania and Market Street, and we were right around where people were just breaking glass, and at different businesses, at the Huntington Bank there at Pennsylvania and Market, as well as Dick's Bodacious Barbecue has had its windows busted out as well. And then IMPD just out of nowhere, literally, I didn't even see anybody out there, just out of nowhere throws a bunch of tear gas canisters into the crowd and basically disperses the whole crowd. And, of course, I've taken another big whiff of it as well.
That was WIBC's Kurt Darling reporting during the riots here in Indianapolis, the George Floyd riots, where businesses were destroyed. Dick's Bodacious is no longer even there on the corner, and people were killed. 5 years later, we learn anything? 5 years later, is Indianapolis any different? The reaction then, the response then, we don't know where Joe Hogsett, the mayor, was. He was not on scene. Do we think that if a riot broke out right now, things would be any different? Tony Katz, good to be with you. Rick Snyder joins us right now, president of the Indianapolis Fraternal Order of Police, serving over 3,000 members in central Indiana, also the national FOP chaplain. Let us start with, I think, a baseline here, which is when we take a look back 5 years ago at what happened, at the devastation, what was your take then on what took place?
Well, our take was the same as our officers, which was that this was a coordinated event, that there was a lot of it was very apparent that there was a lot of pre-planning, and it was apparent that there were paid professional agitators amongst the crowds in downtown Indianapolis. You got to remember, Tony, to put it in context, we had a police action shooting just prior to this that kind of flowed right into all this national conflict as well. And what we even saw then, prior to the riots, were people that were showing up. I mean, picture this. You have an event that's obviously not planned. It's a rapidly evolving event, and all of a sudden people pull up, pop open their trunks, and they're pulling out professionally made signs, bullhorns, and are ready to go to start agitating and spinning up a crowd. Well, it's the same thing that we saw on a huge scale in downtown Indianapolis that led into the riots.
I don't say no to things being pre-planned on professional agitators. I'm discussing the response from Indianapolis. Take me through what you saw from the IMPD, from the mayor's office. What was the response? There were conversations about whether or not the police were ordered to stand down. Walk me through that.
Well, they're definitely, from our officers, made clear to us post-events that it was abundantly made clear to them to stand down, to allow folks to move off of the circle, to allow folks to move throughout the downtown area. And if you remember, and you watch any of those videos, you'll see that our officers literally look like they're trying to stand the line on behalf of our city with their hands tied behind their back. And, you know, once things broke loose, businesses were being destroyed. You got to remember there were 4 people shot, 2 of which lost their lives, hundreds of businesses destroyed, fires everywhere. Our officers had frozen water bottles being thrown at them that were hard as a brick. They were under constant gunfire. That's the thing that people don't remember. Our officers for 2 straight days were under constant gunfire. And to prove it, you can hear it in all the radio traffic, in many of the 911 phone calls. But here's what's interesting, Tony. Not any of that has been published. So there's 48 hours of radio traffic and 911 calls that have never been released by the city of Indianapolis. Back then and still today, we ask this question: why? In the essence of transparency, why wouldn't you make those publicly available for people to weed through? And I can tell you why. Because it was hell on earth, and people would hear it in real time and see and understand what our officers were up against. Yet the mayor convened this crony committee that put together an after-action report. And I want you to listen to part of what they said as their findings. They said that basically blamed the officers for the riots and for defending themselves, and said that officers should always use a quote-unquote soft approach and avoid wearing helmets and protective vests when they're amongst the crowds. So here again, we're going to say to our law enforcement officers, don't do anything to protect yourself, and any protective equipment, leave that back at home or in your car, and put yourselves in the middle of this. What it creates is this real question. What do we do when this happens again? And if people don't think that this is coming back again, you're fooling yourself. Take a good look around our nation right now. Look at what's going on in the state of Washington. The lines are being probed to see how we're going to respond. And don't forget, we also had buses that were stopped after our riots in Indianapolis that were heading back to Asheville, North Carolina. Tony, do you know what's in Asheville? That's the East Coast base for Antifa, and Seattle is the West Coast base. It's a very deliberate, planned process, and we've got to be on guard for that.
Talking to Rick Snyder, president of the Indianapolis Fraternal Order of Police, Rick FOP 86 on the Twitter X. If you want to find him, let's go back to, as you talk about Asheville, North Carolina, and Seattle, Washington. But let's go back to what took place in Indianapolis. You talk about gunfire. You talk about 2 people who were killed. You talk about the fires that were set, the vandalism. Were there any charges or convictions from those involving those who were killed in Indianapolis during those 2 nights of rioting?
There were for the 2 homicides that occurred, but many of the arrests that were made by officers during the riots, especially for disorderly conduct and proactive arrests that were used to de-escalate and diffuse the situation and get the main culprits, if you will, the main antagonizers out of the scene to de-escalate the situation. Immediately, the local Indianapolis Marion County prosecutor dismissed their charges en masse. Well, what do you think that told? That was on the first night, Tony. So what do you think that told those folks for the next night? They had carte blanche to go down there and destroy our city, and it emboldened them, and it undercut the efforts of our law enforcement officers to protect our downtown.
Rick, let me ask the final 2 questions, starting with the first one. It's 5 years later, Rick Snyder. Is this city prepared for another riot?
Well, I'll say this. This is what is so ironic in all of this. Nobody does that type of work better than Indianapolis. We have an extremely well-prepared emergency response group, and all of our officers on the department are trained as mobile field force officers. Most major cities do not have that, but Indianapolis does. If our officers would be allowed to do what they're trained to do in the professional manner in which they know how to do it, I think we can stave a lot of that off. Does it mean that it won't come our way again? No, it absolutely is going to. Tony, just over race weekend in Indianapolis, banners were deployed on the west side of Indianapolis from overpasses that showed signs like "Riot like it's 2020," and 2020 was scratched out and made into 2025. Another banner said, "We will bury you." And then another banner that was made in the same similar fashion said "Free Palestine." What do you think that was trying to convey to race fans coming in from all around the world to Indianapolis 500? So we're a high-profile city. It absolutely can happen again. And we collectively have to decide and make clear to our leaders, what will you do and what will you not do when it comes back home here to Indianapolis?
This brings us to question number 2, Rick Snyder, which is we saw what it is our leadership would not do. Never mind then Governor Holcomb. There was no National Guard presence that existed in Indianapolis, but there was also no presence of the mayor, Joe Hogsett. 5 years later, as we've been asking the question of where was Joe Hogsett for 2 nights of riots, can you answer that question for us, Rick? Do you know where the mayor of Indianapolis was while Indianapolis burned and people got killed?
Couldn't tell you. I can tell you that we were intensely trying to make contact with him with our concerns about how things were developing and evolving. And that's a pretty lonely feeling, I can tell you, when you're trying to get the leader of the city on the horn to say, well, what are we going to do here, boss? And, I feel for our leadership of our police department. I mean, they're empowered to make decisions, and there are some of those decisions that obviously we don't agree with. I think they would do them differently if they had it to do over again. But again, they still answer to civilian leadership, that being our mayor and council leadership. And that was a very frustrating situation. And Tony, the problem with this is lives are on the line. And I know this is near and dear to your heart. I was just in Washington, D.C. I had the honor of speaking at the Kaddish service for our Jewish officer memorial there, provided by the Shamrim Society. And the very next week, just across the street from where we were that day, 2 people were assassinated simply for who they were. And how much talk have you heard about that since, Tony, on a national discussion level? And I just want to keep reminding people, if you think that isn't coming to a city near you, stand by. And we have to make sure that we have leaders in place who will rise to the occasion and stand the line for our community and everyone who lives in it.
Rick Snyder is his name. You can find him on the Twitter X, Rick FOP 86. He is the president of the Indianapolis Fraternal Order of Police. I appreciate taking the time to be with us. Matt Barry.